Hi, I'm Taylor Miller. Welcome to Moments Off the Mat. Today, I'm joined by Gerald Brisco in honor of Native American Heritage Month. Gerald is a storied professional and amateur wrestler. So, Jerry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Taylor, it's always a pleasure to catch up with a fellow Oklahoma Stater, and I really appreciate you thinking about me. And this, been a long time coming, but the country finally observed a month for Native Americans, and I'm very proud of to be part of the heritage of it.
Yeah, and I want to start off with chatting about that. Could you tell us about your Native American heritage and maybe your connection to it?
Yes, I was born in a little place in southeastern Oklahoma called Seminole. Right outside of Seminole, a little town called Bow Lake, Oklahoma, and that's where I was born. And that's where, when they, back in the 1860s, back in those years when President decided he was going to remove the Indians from the South and take them out to no man's land and took them out to Oklahoma, which I'm glad that they did, even though the hardships of our people. But I grew up there. My mom was 3/4 Chickasaw and Choctaw, and our family migrated out, like I said, along with thousands of others that made it out to Oklahoma. And so we said when they got out there, you had to sign what they call the Dawes Act, to verify, and they give you a government allotment. So our allotment was down in southeastern Oklahoma, in a little place called Bow Lakes. So that's where I grew up, and my grandparents, they were the next generation from the Trail of Tears, and so we always came up, believing in the spirits and having a different feeling about who we were and a different pride about who we were.
And remind me, you're in one of the Hall of Fames, correct?
Yes, my brother and I, Jack, we were fortunate enough, and I consider that not being Jack in the Hall of Fame, but I consider it my family being in the Hall of Fame there, because it's such a family. That the Chickasaw Nation is such a family. So to me, that was the biggest family award that I've ever received. But I was inducted in 2015 in the Chickasaw Nation Hall of Fame.
That's very cool. So want to use this time to kind of reintroduce you to some of those that may not know much about you, or just remind people what a legend you are. So what I want to start with is, a lot of people know you from your pro career, but I would love to go back to the beginning and chat about how you got introduced to amateur wrestling and who was your inspiration there.
Oh, well, thank you for asking that. I don't talk about it. I had a brother, like most wrestlers in school. You follow your brother in, and my brother was one of those real once in a lifetime wrestlers that came along. So I followed him along. I started when I was about 7, 8 years old in a little place called Blackwell, Oklahoma. I was born in Bow Lake, like I said, lived there several years, and then our family moved to be closer to Blackwell, Oklahoma. And Blackwell is well known in the state of Oklahoma as being one of the high school wrestling powers and athletic powers there. So being on that wrestling team, my brother was a basketball player during middle school, and Coach Charles Hetrick, who was coach there, saw him on a basketball court and told him, Jack, come out for wrestling. I'll make you a state champion. You don't have a basketball future. You're running everybody. You'll foul out every game. So he talked my brother into going out for wrestling. And so, Jack was a natural at it. He come along and he won 3 state wrestling championships his last 2 years. I think he's pinned everybody he wrestled. And I never will forget the first time my brother met Kenny Mundy. Oklahoma State, we'd sponsored Oklahoma State. We being my brother and I and Florida Championship Wrestling had sponsored Oklahoma State to come down for the Sunshine Tournament. We were good friends, of course, with Tom H. Espo, who was coach at the time. So we brought him down. Kenny Money was on the team, and Kenny come over. My brother's introduced my brother, and he's Jack Brisco. He said, "I beat your pen record." My brother said, "Yeah, Kenny, but it took you 4 years to do what I did in 3 years." You know. So he was quite a wrestler. So I followed him along, and you know how it is, brothers wrestle all the time. So I I made all the teams. I did good. I placed in middle school. I placed second. My eighth grade year, or ninth grade year, I placed second. Third, the first year I didn't even qualify. I made it to regionals, but I didn't qualify. Back in those days too, there wasn't split, classes. It was all the same, so it was pretty competitive. And then, Jack went, like I said, he went along and won his 3 state championships. He got a scholarship to Oklahoma State. And like most wrestling families, wrestling is, the base of your heart and, your passion. So we all wanted to be and watch my brother compete with Oklahoma State University. And so we moved to Stillwater. But going back, who was a major influence on the Brisco family to get into the sport of wrestling? And it was the great Danny Hodge, who grew up in Perry, just a few miles, 16, 17 miles from Blackwell. So that little fertile valley in there, everybody knows what kind of a hotbed Perry is. So Danny was my inspiration, and then then you jump forward, and I got to compete with him in the pro ranks. But we moved to Oklahoma State. I didn't wrestle my sophomore year because I got my leg broken playing football. And so I had to miss my sophomore year. Then in my junior and senior year, I think I lost 3 matches, and 2 of them being in the state final. So I was 2-time state runner-up. And I was still, Roderick saw a little bit, Myron Roderick saw a little bit of potential in me, and he offered me a scholarship. So I went there. I was really wanting to go to Boulder, to tell you the truth, but my mom said, "You're going here, so you got to do what your mom tells you to do." So I ended up at Oklahoma State, and I was in a room, and Taylor, this is what probably helped me more than anybody can imagine, and only us that's been around wrestling can really get this feeling. Going in that wrestling room, like I said, I lost just a few matches, and state of Oklahoma. So we had that attitude. We're the best. We're the best. Walk in that wrestling room in there. All of a sudden, I see this guy walks in, about my size. And, of course, you start eyeballing him up. And he had an arm. One of his arms was skinnier than my finger. That's who I got to compete against. I got it made, It was Fred Fozzard, who went on to be a 2-time national champion and a world team member. I think he was the first. Him and Sanders, I think, dispute on who was actually the first ones to win a gold medal in freestyle for years, but they split that honor to give them both their due credit. So, but the lead out, Yojo Utaki, Bill Harlow, Gene Davis, some of the leaders in our sport, even today, was in that wrestling room competing. And led by, of course, blowing that whistle, the great coach Myron Roderick. They taught me a work ethic in there and a confidence level. And by the whole time I was there, I went into college at 17, so I was a year younger than just about everybody else, except I think for Jay Robinson, who was also in that recruiting class. But they taught me a level of confidence in there that I was able to take after I got out of school. You have your usual choices especially back in the 60s. Go work for some business, be a salesman, or go be a teacher coach and coach wrestling the rest of your life, which that was my love, and I really wanted to. But my brother had left school and become a pro wrestler. And during the summer times, I would travel around with him, setting up the ring, and the bugs started biting me, and then pretty soon, when the time comes, I was out of school. What am I going to do? Am I going to blow a whistle, or am I going to go on the road and try to make some money? So I did it. I made that decision, and I one of the football players I was friends with actually is as a coach down in Sarasota, just south of here in Tampa, where I live. He said, "I remember you coming to Bennett Hall and telling us all you're going to be a pro wrestler, you're leaving school." We kind of laughed, and we kind of, we all loved it and wished you good luck and everything. But in the back of my mind, man, that guy is crazy. He'll be back in no time at all. And then 40 years later, here I am.
Wow. And what's the age difference between you and Jack? What was it?
I'm sorry?
What was the age difference between you and your brother Jack?
Jack, 5 years older than me. And
Okay.
I got real lucky, or Jack got unlucky. Jack was redshirted, of course, 1 year, so that threw him another 1 year behind me. And then his wife had complications having her child, so he dropped out of school for 1 year. So that gave me my freshman year. I was able to be in the same room and compete with my brother Jack, which was a great honor.
That's cool. You kind of already touched on it, but between the teammates you named, Bill Harlow, Yojo, your brother, what was the culture like of Oklahoma State wrestling at that time? Because I've only known it during the John Smith era. What was it like during the Myron Roderick era?
Well, you can't say building, but it was a changing of the guard, because Myron had just come in on the heels of Ed, or not Ed, but Art Griffin, and he just come in on the heels of him, and Myron was like John. I mean, just right out of wrestling, right out of the Olympics, and here's a whistle. Now you're the leader of these guys that just a year ago you were in there working out with. But Myron was the boss. Myron was the coach. But I make one thing clear: everybody in that room knew who the leader was, and knew who was running practice, and who would get in your face off. And that was that quiet little 125-pound Japanese guy that went on to be a two-time Olympic champion, Utaki. He was the inspiration. He would always work out with a couple of weight classes higher than him, and he embarrassed them, but he was such a leader in there, and just one of those silent leaders, just with his glare. I mean, you knew you weren't doing right for the team. So being around guys like that is so inspirational. And if you don't pick something up in an environment like that, you don't deserve to be in there, and you're not trying to pick something up.
It's amazing. You kind of mentioned it earlier with those guys, even from the 60s, the impact that they still have on wrestling even today. It's unreal to think about. So it's really cool.
It really is. I see seeing a lot at the Nationals and everything. And once Cowboy all the way to Cowboy, Coach Bobby Douglas was my freshman coach there at Oklahoma State. Come on, there's another legend, in the sport of wrestling. So the culture was not, hey, we'll just get it done. If the culture was to win a national championship, you came to that school to be a national champion. You came to that school to win a national championship, and so it was an incredible atmosphere. And Coach Roderick, I mean, he was one of these very confident young men, and he would take on the entire team. By the end of the season, Taylor, there were two people in that wrestling room that Myron wouldn't take on. That was Utaki, and that was my brother. Of course, Jack outweighed about 40 pounds because Myron had put on a little bit of weight, but he was still tougher than nails. And the deal was, if he couldn't take you down in a certain amount of time, the team didn't have to run sprints, So it was a real spirited competition. A lot of people say Jack and Myron was the closest thing to a fight that you could get without actually throwing punches. It was brutal.
I want to move forward because you kind of talked a little bit about your transition into the professional wrestling career. When did you get your start? What led to that?
Well, I like I said, I followed Jack in, but the thing about that too, the reason Jack ended up at Oklahoma State to begin with was the local pro professional wrestling promoter, Leroy McGurk, who was also an NCAA champion at Oklahoma State, Oklahoma A&M at the time. Jack had signed a scholarship to play football at the University of Oklahoma for the great Bud Wilkinson. But they, like I said before, Danny Hodge was our hero. And once Roderick heard about Danny Hodge being a hero, of course, he picks up, even though Hodge was a Sooner, he picks up the phone and he calls Leroy McGurk and Tulsa, the local pro wrestling promoter, and said, "I got this kid here. He's got a brother, and the two of them, they're gonna be Cowboys now here. But Jack wants to be a pro, but he signed football. If I tell him you'll sign him a pro contract when he gets out of school," this is how sharp Roderick was in recruiting. I'm sure this would be a violation nowadays, but he talked McGurk into sending a couple of his top stars over to see Jack and tell Jack, "Hey, you go to Oklahoma State. As soon as you step off that mat for your last time, you got a contract to be a pro wrestler." So that swayed Jack to avoid that letter of intent. He'd signed with Bud Wilkinson in OU football and signed with Oklahoma State so he could fulfill his dreams. But those two guys that Leroy sent over, neither one of them was named Hodge, because Hodge wouldn't have talked Jack into going to Oklahoma State.
And then, so for you, you said that watching Jack and kind of followed him around, you got.
Well, I followed Jack in. Like I said, during summer breaks, I would always be on what they call the ring truck. I'd drive the ring truck around. I'd have them set up the ring. I'd help them set up the seats. Sometimes I'd sell tickets. I'd just do all of it. When I'd finish, a lot of the guys would come out and roll around in the ring, and they'd always get me in the ring with them. And they'd trade me if I'd show them something I'd learned at school. They wanted to learn. I would teach them that, but they had to teach me some of the pro wrestling moves. So I was kind of getting trained even at that time there. So one day when after the '68 season, spring break was coming up, and I went over to Tulsa where Jack was living, and he was going on the road. And so we were going to Joplin, Missouri, I think it was. One of those Missouri towns up there. So get up there, and so it just freaky thing. We go into the arena, and promoter comes up, "Well, Jackie, you're supposed to be in a tag team tonight, but your partner, who was Gorgeous George Jr., who hurt his ankle, broke his ankle the night before, so he can't compete tonight. So you'll probably have to wrestle the single." Well, Jack was wrestling a tag team, and they really wanted to be a tag team. So one of them came over and said, "How about his brother?" And Jack said, he don't know anything. He don't know how to work. And one of those guys had been showing me stuff, while I was setting up the ring. He said, "Well, I've worked out with him. He's a wrestler." He said, "As long as he's a wrestler, he knows how to take somebody down, and he knows how to get on them and apply a hold, right?" And we say, "Yeah, because I'm really wanting to do this thing." So that guy said, "Okay, we're working with you." So that's basically how I got into the ring. Was just somebody getting hurt and me being there with my brother on spring break. And then that was 1968, and I just retired this year.
And when did that become permanent for you? Like when you guys became the Brisco brothers and competing regularly?
That's another story, because when we set out, we knew, Taylor, that it was a business, and all the winning and losing. I mean, some of our friends, how can you do that stuff? How can you put yourself through there? But we like I said, we grew up in Bowlegs, Oklahoma. We didn't have a dime. We didn't have a penny, And so, it was a way to make money, and I knew what some of my friends were making, taking those jobs, teaching and coaching. And back in those days in Oklahoma, a teacher's job only paid you about $3,000 a year. I was making that setting up the ring during the summertime, when I was a wrestler. So I knew, I wanted to make some money. So I was one of those, I never cared about winning and losing. Jack didn't either, because we knew our wrestling background from Oklahoma State would carry through. And if we had to get in trouble, if we had to push it, we knew we could beat the guy across from us. So that didn't bother us. We knew it was a business, accepted it as a business, accepted it as an opportunity. But our deal was not to team up. It's kind of, okay, you go one area and I'll go another area, and we'll both get what we call over in wrestling and start drawing big crowds. And then if they want to do tag teams, we can cross promote the territory. So that's kind of what we did. I ended up in Carolinas. My brother ended up in Florida. And we both became stars in those particular places there. And we did a lot of that cross promotion, a lot of tag teams. And then eventually that led to us teaming up. But we both wanted to do what we wanted to do first. Jack wanted to win the heavyweight championship of the world, which he did. I wanted to be junior heavyweight champion of the world, because that's what Danny Hodge was, and I did. Although I did get to beat Hodge, that was my only regret. Danny had beat up there in age, and he had already lost the title. So I was fortunate enough they trusted me with it, so they gave it to me. So we both achieved our individual goals, but we'd won several tag team titles, that they gave us during the course of the year, just, helter skelter here. So, well, now let's be a tag team, see what we can do. So then we teamed up, and then we started traveling all over the world, basically.
It's fascinating to me because you guys were part of those smaller promotions at the time, right? And then you kind of were there from the beginning when the WWF kind of started taking over. And that's just so fascinating to me. So I guess, could you just talk about how you guys got started in WWF?
Okay, well, that's a kind of a complicated story. That goes back to being wrestlers and being Oklahoma State guys. We always knew that, you can't wrestle forever. I mean, you get 4 or 5 years of college and you're out. In pros, you're lucky if you get 10 years. You're lucky if you get 5 years where you're making big money. So we always knew. So we always were looking for ways out. What are we going to do after the business? So we opened businesses up. We bought a real estate company. We bought an auto repair facility. And along the way, we started buying, promoters liked us, and then I hate to pat myself on the back, but we were kind of always his show guys, because we were true wrestlers from Oklahoma, and that was one thing. And we're also minorities, so that they really pushed that, and so we got to be. So we ended up being able to purchase part of the promotions. Ended up with the majority up in Georgia. And then when Vince McMahon wanted to go national, we talked to him about buying our stock out and hooking up with him, hooking a wagon to him, and he agreed to it. So we gave him that vehicle to be global like he is. We didn't give it to him; we sold it to him.
And at what point did your career turn toward like the scouting part of it? Because if I'm not mistaken, you were involved in scouting and recruiting Hulk Hogan. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, that was the very beginning. I mean, that came along with Taylor being part businessman, being part owner of a promotion, and seeing this young man over there, and kind of the cash registers kind of starts ringing. Who is this guy? He's playing a bass guitar for a rock and roll band. And imagine this, I'm hanging out in a bar and I see him, and holy cow, who is that 6'7" guy, 300-pounder up there playing bass guitar, with these little guys? So I asked the bartender if he could introduce me, and we got him down, and the rest is history. So yeah, I started recruiting basically as a way to make money as a promoter, because I knew this guy could be a big star one day. I didn't know he would end up being the major league star, just like when I first met Dwayne Johnson. I knew he'd be a star, but I had no clue he'd be this. But yeah, Hogan was really one of our first guys we brought into the pro wrestling business.
Who are some other names that people might recognize that you had a hand?
Well, I helped Kurt Angle make up his mind. And, I don't know if you're aware of this, but, Kurt Angle was almost an Oklahoma State Cowboy.
I did not know that.
He came along right when Joe C., got in trouble there at Okie State, and we got banned from the national tournament. And that's the reason Kurt didn't come, because Roderick had actually gone up and recruited Kurt, and Kurt was ready to sign. Then the news come out that there were Oklahoma State being severely punished like that. So he was going to play football at Penn State. He had scholarship offer at Penn State. So even at that time there, when the news come out, it was too late to grab that scholarship. So Clarion right there in his backyard, they were open, and they were going to give the hometown hero a scholarship. So they worked something out, so that's how he ended up at Clarion. So Kurt couldn't make up his mind where he wanted to be a sports anchor on Pittsburgh TV or be a WWE superstar. And it was once again through that relationship with Myron Roderick and Oklahoma State, and that kinship and that trust that Kurt put into me to lead him along the right way, right direction. Towards that. So that's when he, after I got involved, that's when he decided to sign on. So Kurt's another one that all the fans did, regardless of collegiate, international, or professional. Everybody knows Kurt Angle. Brock Lesnar, and that goes back also. See, all this has a theme. It all goes back to wrestling at Oklahoma State. Jay Robinson and I was on the same recruiting class. Who's his number one star pupil was Brock Lesnar, and Jay and I helped me recruit. Jay helped me recruit Brock and Sheldon Benjamin, one of the greatest athletes ever to come out of Minnesota. Jay threw him in as a package deal, and then, believe it or not, we almost got Brandon Agam out of that group too, but we did. So guys like that, now I got the Casper brothers there. Everybody knows Jacob Casper, what an outgoing young man he is, and his brother Drew, that was a Division III superstar and undefeated, and got the nationals taken away from him, like a lot of other guys did when COVID hit. So I've still got some guys coming up there that I'm very proud of, but Taylor, all that goes back and getting Jacob. I mean, who's coach at Duke? Oklahoma State, Glenn Latham. So there's another connection through wrestling. So it helped me all through my career as a professional being a wrestler.
Yeah, and I guess you already answered my question. I was going to say, why was it important for you to keep an eye on the college wrestlers? Is it those college connections that you had?
It's not only those college connections, but I had a dream, and fortunately, I had my brother to help me show me the path there. A lot of these guys don't know. A lot of these guys, I mean, Jacob here's the academic athlete of the year at Duke University. It means he's pretty bright. All his life, he's had every action figure WWE ever put out, and every belt he had WWE put out. He always wanted to be a pro wrestler, but he had no clue how to become one. And he and I, through the forums of Twitter, I was actually in Rio at the Olympics down there, and I said I'm in Rio, trying to find the next WWE superstar. With 10 seconds later, Casper shoot me a wiseacre remark, hey, I'm sexier and better athlete than any of those guys you'll find down there. So I had to do it over who is this kid, telling me, that he's better than these Olympic athletes. And I found out, and the kid's a hell of an athlete as well.
Yeah, and he and his brother have been kind of blowing up on the NXT stage, which has been really exciting to watch. You just made me think of something. So, like, if you could pick anybody, maybe on our current national team or the Olympic team or world team, who do you think would be the best of those guys or girls even? Outside of Gable Steveson, obviously we already know that that's kind of his plan. Who would be someone that you would try to talk into it?
Tamara Stock be my number one choice.
Makes a lot of sense, yeah.
The personality, the love. She became Miss America when she won that gold medal. She became the face of USA wrestling to me. It was, Gable had done a phenomenal feat when he came back and won in 10.7, so whatever it was. But he did a phenomenal feat. But the personality that young lady showed, Tammy showed, and the charisma that just oozed out over TV. I was actually on the phone to Triple H, Hunterhurst Helmsley, Paul Levesque, who was, head of that. So, and he was watching too early in the morning. We were watching everything. And wow, he said, we're already in contact with her. So we've contacted her. We've had Adeline Gray down, and that was after the Rio, and she impressed, and everybody's wanting her, but she wanted to go back to the Olympics again, and we respected that. We don't want to be, talk somebody out of doing something, and we being, here they are watching TV, thinking I should be there. What am I doing here? So, go fulfill your dream first. We'll be there. And I'm just speaking ladies, but that's how impressed I am with the USA women's division, the ladies division of freestyle wrestling. What we've developed here in the last few years, Coach Steiner and all those things. And by the way, Coach Steiner, Native American, he's renewing something that I really wanted to get kicked off. Is having an indigenous, North American indigenous wrestling team, to compete, on a world level. And he'll get there knowing his drive. But on the men's level, of course, Gwiz, who wouldn't want that stud athlete, Jaden Cox, we're loaded with personalities. And Jaden, so talented. Jaden being son of entertainers, he knows what entertainment's all about. So how fast would he catch on? He'd catch on like a speeding bullet.
Very cool. Let's see, what else have I got for you? Do you have any behind the scenes stories from your time with WWE that we might enjoy?
Yeah, I'll start with Kurt Angle. And well, I could do Kurt and Brock, but no time limit here. I got to be careful. I told myself, be brief and just tell the story, so and without rambling. So Kurt Angle, and I'll use a name that everybody knows, and it happened. Eddie Guerrero. I don't know if you follow, but back in the Attitude Era, Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle, they had one of these real blood feuds, where it was knockdown, drag out every damn time. Eddie Guerrero was one of these street guys that could fight, and had something that you push him too far, he would go. And so he and Kurt had, everybody says, it's rehearsed. How can this do it? But it's so competitive, Taylor, inside that ring. It's just, you're right on the edge of losing it. You're not out there to hurt anybody. You're out there to make money with them and make money the next night with them. So you're right in those confines of just, and those two guys are, were so competitive against each other. And Kurt did something and Eddie didn't like it. So we go to the back. all of a sudden I'm setting up at the control center. Everybody, Brisco, your boys, your boy Angel's out here. He fight. I mean, who the hell's gonna fight Kurt Angle? So I go out. Eddie Guerrero double legging Kurt Angle. He don't finish the double leg, but he gets real close to it, and by that time, I'm there. Then several other guys go in there. So Eddie's sitting over the side over there. So my podcast partner, John Layfield Bradshaw, looks over at Eddie and said, Eddie, he said, I know I'm stupid. I'm stupid trying to fight a Olympian. I'm stupid, but that's just how competitive. Then Brock Lesnar and Kurt, the competitives in those two. We're up in Fargo, which Fargo, everybody, in our world knows what Fargo is. It's one of the meccas of wrestling, and so we're doing a live show up there. WWE is. So everybody had been ribbing. Both of these guys, Kurt and Brock, hey, the guys, are asking me who could win. Kurt called out. I'm an Olympic champion, national champion, but they think Brock, because Brock is bigger than me, they think Brock can beat me. I can't live with this. I said, Kurt, whatever you do, don't let these guys talk you into a fight against Brock. You guys are friends. Brock would call it. Brisco, I don't know what to do. I can't tell him. I'm a big guy. Kurt, I think there's a hell of a difference. I said, don't let the same thing. Finally, I got them together. I said, okay, you guys, if you guys really want to get after it, I'll call a high school coach down there. He'll clear his match. He'll be glad to clear his match for Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle and say I had the match of the century in my high school gym there. So do it there in the privacy. Don't do it out here in public in front of so the boys can say, well, I told you so, and, make a little money on side wagers and everything. So we're in Fargo, where the competitive spirits of both sides of these guys are coming out. Well, I want Fargo. I want, all that stuff. I want to, we. And the next thing I know, it's the same thing. They're out in the ring, going, and I'm getting hollered at. Brisco, get out of here! Break. By the time I get out there, they're nose to nose, and it's too late. I'm not stepping inside. I'm 55 years old at that time. I'm not stepping inside trying to break these guys. I have to break. Come on, guys! And the next day, Brock is hooked up with him, slinging Kurt around. Kurt back up, goes for the double, and Brock goes up against the rope. So they break, like they could. As soon as they step out, Kurt's speed, boom, boom, power. Brock goes down. Take down Kurt. Okay, 2 out of 3. Here we go again. So Brock is pushing back. They're pushing back and forth. Brock tries a couple of power moves, and Kurt fancies himself out. So finally, Kurt gets in, and he takes him down right in the middle of the ring with a low single, and match over with. And then they shake hands, and all the guys are happy. But Vince McMahon was so mad at me for allowing this to go on, because here are 2 mega superstars. If one of them would have got hurt, and it would have been my fault for allowing this to go on. So you got to learn the value of your talent, and you can't allow these jokes to go on like that. Well, it did. It happened. So, that's my story of those two.
It's a good one. I like it. Can imagine the competitiveness all the time, right? So.
Right. Every day.
You mentioned that you just retired within the last year. So what is life looking like for you?
Well, I love what what I did, and I'm still doing it. I'm gonna be out. I follow a lot of people on Twitter, and I follow. I got all the publications and everything. I keep up with the sports. I just want to make sure that my name is still out there, that these guys that do want to make the switch over and have a great career in entertainment and also and be a spokesman for whatever cause, because WWE is, you can look it up, as one of the most charitable organizations there is. They support so many things, and so it's a great company to be associated with. So I want to still help the young men and women out there that feel like they can step over the entertainment side of the sport and become what they want to be. So I want to be there for them, and I'll lead them along, and I'll give them the direction. And I still have contact with the right people up there. So it's not like I'm just going to call some run of the mill person and say, hey, I got somebody. I'm gonna call the boss. And I had a conversation just 2 days ago about this with them. So they're still looking for me to provide them talent, and I'm gonna provide them talent, or whoever else they want to go to. I don't care, but I want to help. I want to help these athletes achieve their other goals.
So how can people follow you? Where can they follow you on social media? How can they connect with you?
Twitter, FG Brisco, Instagram, the FG Brisco, because FG was taken somehow. So I hate that, but I'm the FG Brisco. And all social media, and I'm easy to find. They can Google me, or they can call Taylor, and I trust you. One of my biggest finds actually came from the kid that worked there several years when Bobby Lashley was there, and he's gonna kill me for not remembering that. John, but John Fuller called me and said, I got this guy out there, Bobby Lashley. And so I went out to see Bobby, and as soon as I laid eyes on Bobby, I shook John's hand, said thank you, and I called the boss, and he was still in the Army, and we got one of those Army early releases for him with the help of USA Wrestling, of course. And next thing you know, he's a WWE superstar.
Awesome. I have so enjoyed this interview with you, but I do have one question that's on everybody's mind. Do you have any WrestleMania tickets?
I wish I did so I could go, but Taylor, believe me, if I get some, you'll be the first to know.
I know you get bombarded with that question every year, so I just had to ask.
Every year, 2 years in a row, it's in my backyard.
Well, Jerry, thank you again so much for joining us. I have had a blast, and I hope that you have too.
I do too. Please tell all my friends out there at USA Wrestling, congratulations. You guys have done a marvelous job. I mean, wow. Of course, I keep raving about the ladies, the women's division, but man, what a great job they're doing there. And Matt's going to do the same to Greco and D'Angelo, who might be a WWE superstar down the line, Hancock, because he's got the charisma and the personality too.
Yeah, he sure does.
You guys are loaded. I ain't going away from you guys. You guys are my favorite source of talent.
Good. Love that. All right. Thanks again for joining us.
You're welcome.